So now we're going to do decimals. We're going to start our operations with decimals. All right. We got to remember some things first. When you're adding or subtracting decimals, you have to line up the decimal. Okay, you can fill in the empty spots with zeros, which we'll do that in a little bit. But remember, you got to line up the decimals. All right, if a number does not have a decimal, remember the decimal goes at the end. It's a whole number, okay? Then I want to make sure you're real clear on the places, at least a few places here. Remember, there's a whole number part on the left-hand side of the decimal. And then the all on the other side, the right-hand side, is your decimal part. And that's really the fraction parts of a whole number. Okay, that on the right-hand side, that's really fractions, but whose denominator is either 10, 100, or thousandths, or on and on. Okay, there's only one ones place. Okay, remember, that's the only ones place. There's no ones place in the decimal, because if you think about these as being fractions, if you have 1 on the underneath, that's really a whole number. Like if you have 10 over 1, that's a whole number. That would be on that side. That's why there's only one ones place. Then we start with the tenths, then hundreds and thousands. Okay, so if you can keep that in mind, there's only ones, you'll probably make less errors, because a lot of times you'll think this is the ones and then tenths and then hundreds. Starts with the tenths. Okay. Another couple things to remember as well is the zero. Okay, let's try to make sure we understand about the zero. 1.50 or $1.50 is $1.50. Okay. 1.05 is $1.05. To show 1 cent, it's 0.01. Why? Because that's 1/100th. 1 cent, 100 of them make up a dollar. So you only have one, that's 1/100th. That would be the second decimal place. All right. To show 10 cents, that's 1/10 of a dollar, or 10 hundredths, 10 pennies, or 10 cents is 1/10 of a dollar. So that one's going to be in the 10th place. Okay, I hope that helps. A lot of times we get confused on what's 50, what's 5 cents, and we forget. But we've got to always make sure the little places really matter once you go to the, well, always, but especially once you go to the right of the decimal. Okay, if the zero can roll off, this might be helpful. You don't really need it, okay? For example, here's when you can't roll it off. If it's in between a decimal or a number, that thing will, if you think of it as on a seesaw or something, if you think of it rolling, it can't roll off. That 4 is going to hold it there. Here, there is no decimal, so it's not going to, there's no zero, so there's no zeros. But I guess I try to make it relate to here. So this, in this case, this 0 is going to roll off. If you put it on a little teeter-totter or a little seesaw, that 0 is going to roll right off. Nothing's holding it. This 0 is being held in by the decimal and that number. This 0 here is going to roll right off, okay? When you have the number 240, the decimal is really a decimal there. So in this case, on the little seesaw, that decimal will hold that 240, okay, that 0, okay? So that is important. You need that 0 there. On this one, if you have 240.00, these two zeros roll off. This one does not, because again, the same decimal is right there. Now, when you have a number, let me just rewrite it, 0.050. And now a lot of you have been taught to go ahead and put a 0 next in front of the decimal. And that, a lot of times people say to do that, which is fine to do it, it's not wrong. It just helps people see, oh, there's a decimal place there. And that's a good thing to do it. The only point I'm trying to make here is that you don't really need to have it. Okay, so you can, because again, it will roll off. This 0 you have to have. That's holding a place, the 10th place. You need to have it. It's going to stay on, because if it's on the seesaw, it would not roll off. This 0 would roll off. So that's what I'm saying. The easiest way to write 0.05, 500ths, is just simply 0.05. Okay, it's okay to have those zeros there, but just know that you don't have to have them. Okay. I hope that made things a little clear. All right. Now, to add or adding and subtracting decimals, let's go ahead and do an example. But again, we're going to estimate. So that number there is about -25, and that's going to be about -1. So you're adding two negatives, so like signs add, it's going to be -26. And when you line up the decimals, and here I had to add a couple extra, not add, I had to put a couple of zeros extra just to line them up to make sure, and then I got that number. And it was a negative because both signs are negative. Okay. This one now I have to really subtract, because one's negative and one's not. I'm going to estimate first, so -17 plus 160 is going to give me about 143. So when I actually do it, I thought I'd go ahead and do it. Now when I do it, I know I have to subtract. I'm really subtracting. So I'm going to put the bigger number on top, and then I subtract the 16.5. And you line up your decimals, so I'm going to put a 0 there to hold that place. So I subtract, that's going to be 5. Now I can't borrow, I can't subtract, I can't borrow. Here I can borrow. Borrow 1, make that 10, make that 9, just kind of reviewing those basic things there. 10 minus 5 is 5. Bring the decimal down, try to make it nice and straight and big. 9 minus 6 is 3, 5 minus 4 is 1, and then you still have that 1 there. Now, is it positive or negative? Well, the largest number was positive, so it's look at that, it's almost exactly the same number. Okay, so chances are we did a good job. All right, next one. Okay, number 3. This time we got 3 decimal numbers we're trying to add. So we're just going to do 2 at a time. First we're going to estimate. That rounds to about -8. This is about 0, so we're going to subtract 0. And this ends up being about 5, -5, or minusing -5, which means to add the 5. So really I'm just going -8 plus 5, which is -3. Okay, so my answer should be somewhere around -3. All right, so the first thing, you take the first 2 numbers. You add the opposite there, just like you see that I did. And this time both the signs are the same, so I know I need to add them. So I'm going to line up the decimals and add them, and then keep the negative sign. Then I'm going to take this number and I'm going to add the positive 4.5. But because the signs are different, I really subtract. So you got to really keep focused and keep step by step. Make sure you're asking yourself those kind of questions. What do I do? What sign? Okay. So I put the higher number on top and I subtract, and I get -3.28, which is really close to my estimate of 3. -3. All right, now sometimes you get one like this. It says if n is this, find this plus n. So all it is just substituting in. So I substituted it in, and then I estimated it. Okay, what is -56? That rounds to about -56. That rounds to about -10. We'll just add those together because they're both negative, and you got -66 should be about what my answer is. So I realize that, yes, I am really going to add these numbers because they're both negative. So I add them, and I come up to almost exactly the answer, which is, but it's going to be negative, so it's -66.3. Okay, so you got to keep reminding of all those things you got to do. What am I really adding or subtracting? What will my answer really be? Okay, so now we're going to multiply. When you multiply fractions, decimals, you want to estimate first. So that's going to really be -3, and that's about 7. So -3 times 7 will give you a -21. So my answer should be somewhere around -21. Okay, again, no, I did go up each time. I went 3, my estimate was higher there, So my answer, again, that might be a little bit higher than my actual answer. So what you want to do is put the number with the most digits on top. This is kind of just a help to help you get the right answer. So I'm going to put my 6.78 has more digits than my 2.9. Put it on top, I multiply like usual. Then remember, you count the number of numbers after the decimal in the problem. I have 1, 2, 3. So that's how many you make sure are behind the decimal in the answer. And there you have it. And you have a negative because it's negative times positive. Okay, number 6. Now we have 2 very small numbers, okay? So really my estimate is 0 times 0 is 0. So my answer is going to be really, really small. Okay, so I set it up. Again, I put the one with my most digits on top. I don't really need this 0, so I don't need to worry about it. I don't need to multiply by it. Don't waste your time doing that. Just get down to what you really need. And you set it up. I multiply it on through, and my answer has to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers behind the decimal, but my answer only had 4 numbers. So I have to go ahead and make another 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my answer is 0.01353, and that's really, really small, so it probably is right. Okay, see how the estimation really, really helps you have more confidence when you get your answer. Okay, number 7. Now we're going to divide. All right, we have this number, so we estimate it. We can estimate, when you divide numbers, you can estimate using what we call compatible numbers, which are numbers that that are easier to divide. I could have said 63, but I know 5 won't go into 63, so I'm just going to pick one that 5 will go into, and that way I'll kind of be done with my estimating. It'll still be pretty close. So I divided, got -12. So when I actually did it, remember the top dog, if the top dog goes in the house, the first number goes in the house, okay? Because this would be on top if I had it like a fraction like this. Okay, so the 63 goes in. Don't worry about the negative because you know your answer is going to be negative. You always have to keep that in mind. So you do what you want to do now, make sure that when you have the decimal here, you probably remember you got to move it over to the end, and however many places you moved it over, you got to move it over here. The 63 didn't have a decimal, so I got to put it at the end and then go 2 more places over and then bring it straight up, make it nice and big. Okay, make sure you get yourself all set up like that first. And then you realize, okay, 500 goes into 600 about once. So you put that 1 right above that 0 with the last number you're using this time, okay? subtract on down, and then you realize, oh, it goes in there twice, and that's it. There's not even a decimal part. This is a whole number. I'm exactly right. So that kind of turned out nice. Okay, last one is negative 0.128 divided by negative 3.2. Okay, estimate again. I've got a really small number, like 0, divided by negative 3. Well, 0 divided by anything is 0. So my answer, again, is going to be very, very small. All right, so I set it up. Top dog goes in the house. I move my decimal over. Move your decimal over. Bring it straight up. 32 won't even go into 12, so I put a big 0 right above that 2. Once you have that decimal, you got to put something behind in every place after that decimal. And then you realize, okay, 4 times that. So the answer is just simply going to be 0.04. It's going to be positive because negative divided by negative